when the extra public transport improvements will be delivered. And we shouldn't wait till 2031, which is when the project's finishing, for that to happen. And it may be useful for Vivid, yourselves, and the bus operators to look at things like rerouting some scheduled bus routes through the park and ride, so it's not purely park and ride. There is going to be an issue with construction traffic, but there is no way in the universe that constitutes a reason for refusal. That's going to be the first problem. But there's no way that constitutes a reason for refusal, so the construction management plan will need to be robust. But what leeway can we have to try and deliver public transport improvements before 2031? Is there some trigger mechanisms? As I know from the prison, there are trigger mechanisms. Or what things are in place, Ian?
So again, one of the obligations and conditions we're looking at is around that bus. Let's focus really on those bus opportunities. So the design has been produced by Vivid to enable an exit, a bus gate, on the north side of the park and ride. So we can go east-west rather than north-south from the park and ride, if that is appropriate. Say if it is appropriate, because obviously you could route through the Bellway scheme, and again we're making sure that there is an adequate ability to do that as well. In terms of actually then delivering additional bus routing, that is an ongoing discussion. It's already started, of course, with the bus providers, because they need enough ticket sales to make it worth their while, so to speak. So again, a financial contribution to be negotiated to support that in the earlier phases is something that would be building part of the Section 106 obligation. A number of different ways you can deliver that. Traditionally, you would start with a very low demand responsive piece, so that people don't feel landlocked and on their own. May not be necessary here if we can provide access into the park and ride and connect with the good bus service there, albeit a north-south bus service. But as different phases come on, and it's a long burn. 2031. It's not that far away, but it does take a while. And obviously, as the park and ride transforms, as is this council's intention, into a transport hub, that will change the dynamic and the costings and opportunities there. But the physical infrastructure of this scheme has accommodated an east-west route, and the viability of such route is obviously to be supported, not delivered, supported by planning obligations, both on this scheme and Bellway, to maximise that opportunity.
Thank you, John. Councillor Smith, then Smythe.
Thank you, Chair. We certainly need the 835 homes, and it's great to see that, and it's nice to see. I think the scheme overall looks good, but it's good to see that it's been designed with blending with the Bellway homes as well. I think that's good on that side of things. But it's clear that the parking and the transport are an issue, which has already been said. My question really is around the Highways Authority has objectives. It's interesting to see that all the consultations have been done and no objections, but apart from the Highways one. And I'd like to know a little bit more about the what is going to happen around that Twyford Avenue access point. Could you tell us a little bit more about that, please?
Certainly. So largely that matter has been resolved, and the major point of concern from the Highway Authority is that overall parking provision and the undeniable uncertainty with it. So the original submission for the application didn't include a junction redesign for the Twyford Avenue connection, where of course you have the national cycle network sort of cutting across it and pedestrians cutting across it, so that obviously created some risk. Since the deferral of the application from the last agenda, a design has been provided and gone through a stage 1 road safety audit to demonstrate that it is, there are options, there's 2 or 3 I think, to deliver that junction safely and appropriately within areas that are within the control of the applicant and the local Highway Authority. The Highway Authority obviously wants some more information, and that will be required through planning condition, and obviously taking that through road safety audit stages 2 and 3, etc. But it was a lack of certainty at the submission stage, and even as we went into the last iteration, which was the ground for that area of concern. But those concerns have now been resolved to the satisfaction of the planning authority.
Sorry, my second part of the question was around, and Councillor Sands already sort of spoken about it, but about the bus movements and things going forward. There is at 10.47, it sort of said we could impose a condition around the, and I think that would be quite a good idea to do that, just following on from what Darren had said there. I think we should impose a condition on the bus service to make sure, if I've read that correctly.
If I may say, you have read that correctly. I would actually suggest probably not the best solution. Planning obligation is better, because if we wish to take some money off of them and say make a bus service contribution, has to be an obligation, not a condition. Degree of technical semantics one can argue, but absolutely. And if that's not clear, and I will entirely accept that that may not be clear, we can ensure through the minutes of the meeting that is a clear instruction of the committee, if they are satisfied overall with the scheme, that there would be an expectation of a bus service contribution, which we say would likely be in the heads of terms for the Section 106 agreement.
Okay, well, we're okay adding that instruction. Juliet, is it? We can add an instruction around that.
Yes, I think I had a discussion with Ian about that earlier on, so we're content with that as a planning obligation.
Thank you, John.
Sorry, my last point was just around the red boundary line. There's a little jab out to the left-hand side. What was that? Because it sort of goes outside, but it is the boundary line. Is that
Say that there's was a pier of some kind, a protrusion, so that's why it's in their control. That whole area is being repurposed and reformed. I say that's their primary ecological area, bird refuse, etc. So lots of work's gone into that with Natural England, I'm aware, to create that space over there. So actually that little blob kind of moves left a bit, I think, from recollection, and certainly the nature of the edge treatment there is quite different. As I noted earlier, the pathway's pulled away from that, so that does become an area focused on biodiversity and ecology rather than recreational movement.
I want to ask a question about a novel condition, and one that I hope we'll be able to put in here. I really do support the low traffic ambitions here. But there are three things that I think need to be recognised that are also radical and new and will need to be consequential on developing low traffic areas. I'm assuming of the car parking spaces provided, quite a substantial number of those will be for people who have blue badges. And mostly residents who have blue badges should certainly be given priority. That reduces the number of free car parking spaces considerably. There are three ways which I think are coming up in popularity among the public, and that involves various varieties of car sharing. We've been experimenting with car sharing with our car and with a neighbour, and it's worked really well. Would consider it as a permanent arrangement. So first of all, there are those informal arrangements between neighbours which could be facilitated by the community work done on the estate, and in some circumstances that could be a reason for allocating a car parking space. But second of all, there's of course car clubs, and I would like to see the possibility of an allocation of spaces for car club. I think they're called car clubs. Very common in London now. Lots and lots of my son's neighbours in Peckham use those, and I think that is the shape of the future. Really, it's expensive owning a car that you don't use very much. And that makes that a different. And the third thing might be to encourage a ordinary car hire company to have a place in the transport hub, because that would enhance the possibilities of people picking up a car to run somewhere locally, possibly maybe up to the Downs for an afternoon or something or whatever. And I would like a condition in here that obliges the developer to investigate those things and to put forward a traffic and travel plan that includes those different forms of car ownership and car use. Because I'm quite certain that would make a difference to people's attitudes to wanting to live in a car-free environment. And I'm quite certain it would also provide a model for other places in our very densely occupied city. So in other words, just to say there's a possible typology here of private but contracted car sharing arrangements, car clubs set up as they are in many, many cities. We don't seem to have one here, and probably should. This could be the start of that. And thirdly, the possibility of a reasonable, possibly locally run, possibly not-for-profit run car hire company based on the traffic hub. I don't know yet how far that could go, but certainly the use of technology, computer cards that you slip in and booking online would make a car club a very attractive thing to encourage here. And I'd like to see something in the traffic and transport plan that there would be a condition on here which makes that possible. And I'd just like to say that even if it's not currently possible, we should actually pioneer that being a possibility and really push the limits on that. Just because it hasn't been done before is no excuse that in a sense we need to be inventing and getting accepted such conditions if we're going to build more low car ownership developments. Because I do pick up exactly what Linda is saying about car, lack of parking and lack of those sorts of things. And if you're wanting to sell some of these properties, then I would imagine that would make it easier to sell and easy for you to realise the prices that you wanted on the site. Never mind the ability to help social housing tenants who want to have a use of a car occasionally access that at a cost that will be, for many people, far below the cost of owning and insuring and repairing a car of their own that sits on the hard standing most of the time. So our question is, can we put such a condition in, and can we be as imaginative as possible about that, so we can persuade the Housing Association to collaborate on that, cooperate and enable, particularly as it's probably something that they'll be asked to do elsewhere in other similar developments.
The hands are flying up all over the place.
Just very quickly, just to add to Judith, also electric car points as well added to that, because I think, if we want to cleaner travel, that might also be considered along the points that Judith's made.
Gerald, is it related?
Just to help, the council has signed a contract with Enterprise for a car club in the city, so it's up and running, but identifying spaces which we need to do for car club parking bays is a sensible thing to do, but there is a framework already agreed with Enterprise, so this is happening.
And also, car hire provision is part of the conversation around the transport hub as well, so hopefully that will happen as well.
But that doesn't take away from Judith and Russell's point. Putting in a condition, it actually reinforces the point of putting a condition, because we've got that car club available in the city with a contract already signed.
Are we able to?
Yeah, it unfortunately, not particularly interviewed at all. It's a fairly common practice now. So absolutely, the car parking access and management plan, that's what we're talking about. You'll see in paragraph 7.7 a breakdown both of the electric charging spaces and the short-term spaces, which can well be used for car club. And I know it's a big part of the draft travel plan we've already seen, and a big opportunity. If you'll indulge me for a second, members, slightly off-piste, one of the biggest opportunities for the transport hub, which is not the scheme in front of you, but we do need to look at opportunity when you're dealing with large-scale generation, is exactly that. If we delivered Enterprise Car Club in the transport hub and walked away, I'd be deeply, bitterly disappointed. Something with a bit more effort. People don't want to come and hire a hatchback every time. They might want a van, they might want a family car, they might want a multi-seat car. These are the things the Transport Hub gives you that opportunity to do, so that people don't need to own an individual private car. That mobility as a service, which is core to the logic of the Transport Hub, is the modal change. And that's what gives me confidence that a council, it's not the planning authority, a council that wanting to deliver that can support a low car option. But it all happens out of order. So quite often it all happens over a period of time, and what may work great in 2040, will take 17 years to get between here and there. So there are risks that this council has to bear in mind when they're doing that planning judgment. So there's a lot of advantages and a lot of opportunity, and obviously those immediate and sometimes short-term and other disadvantages.
So these things will be included in the car parking plan, and we are looking ahead. The other thing is, I hope that some of the car parking spaces will be available possibly by pre-booking for visitors. I cannot take my car up to Peckham where my son lives, because there is no visitor parking for more than an hour anywhere near where he lives in Peckham. And the behaviour change is enormous there. We go happily every week on train and bus, It does change your behaviour, but it is, I think, restrictive when you've got people who can't use that public transport and who want to visit relations. So I hope there is going to be some, probably pre-bookable space for visitors that residents can book if they want grandparents to visit, that sort of thing.
So just without wanting to drag this one on too far, there is a degree of how far we can go as a planning authority. Obviously, on that day-to-day management, we can create those spaces, but they will be private roads. There's no current intention to adopt these, so they does give the landowner, Vivid in this case, greater opportunities to look at that. However, one of the big opportunities, and an absolute minimum I would expect to see delivered through the car parking access and management plan, we've taken that title intentionally, is you can make a pedestrian gate through to the park and ride, so which ultimately could be a transport hub, and that obviously provides a lot of visitor parking to the adjacent residential area, not just Vivid and Bellway, but obviously beyond into Stamshaw.
Possible, but some sort of electronic pre-booking would be helpful to people who are very going to be very worried about whether they can find a space and that sort of thing.
Okay. So, Councillors Mason and then Shah.
So far as I can see from the plans, the foul water sewerage from this development will feed into the already heavily used Victorian sewerage system in Stamshaw. Is that sewerage system in Stamshaw adequate for both the Bellway and the Vivid Homes development? And if not, how will the foul water sewerage be managed?
In the English legal system, there is an obligation on water and utility companies to accept foul water, but they equally have a power under the Water Management Act to require contribution from developers that are increasing that impact. In short, it's not a planning authority issue, it's outside the planning function. Yes, sure, we need to make sure that there is a connection and we can see where it is, whether there is sufficient capacity and how that capacity will be enhanced if necessary. If it sits outside planning regulation, it's covered by the Water Management Act.
Councillor Shah.
Yeah, just to clarify, is there any provision for community space in that location and children nursery?
Yes, there's 5 buildings that one of which could be a community, could be a children's nursery. That's a Class E use, and certainly whether or not and how they will be delivered as community spaces and/or commercial/community like a nursery is part of the aspect of the planning obligation associated with community access that we discussed earlier.
Thank you. Members, comments? Councillor Sanders.
Thank you. I wish to move the officer's recommendation with the additional recommendation outlined in the SMAT, and also a recommendation around a planning obligation to deal with sustainable transport, particularly around demand responsive transport and additional bus services as per 10.47. I think car clubs are great. They're in my ward in London, but they're already, and the EV charging is already in there. I'm putting it forward both for negative and positive reasons. Negative because there is absolutely nothing in here that would justify refusal at all. That will survive the planning inspector, but positively because it boils down to 2 words: about time. It's about time that this empty site, which has been an eyesore in the city, finally has a development that might work. We've all looked at it, we've all come in off the M275, and we've all gone, well, what's this, with the wreck in Titner Lake and everything else. So it's about time we've got a proposal. It's about time we've got a comprehensive planning proposal for a significant number of homes that's policy compliant for affordable homes. It's about time. It proves that developers can do it, despite the many, many siren noises we hear from other developers about it, that apparently it's impossible. It's about time we fixed the Titner Sea Defence Wall, the one bit of the city that we can't fix, because apparently there's no homes near it. So therefore we can't get the government investment that's required. It's about time we were able to have a scheme that might actually stop most of Titner flooding, and possibly the Mount Batten Centre flooding. It's about time we had a development that might actually become a proper community. It was about time. So we have, you want me to about time to shut up?
We got it. We got it. It's about time.
We've wanted to do it for decades. But I'm just thinking that I'm happy to do that because I think this is long overdue and is absolutely essential. And it is about time that we had something like this.
It's about time we move on. We do. There are many hands in the air. Take your choice. Judith,
I'm willing to second
Okay,
that
all right,
for the
thank
same reasons, with the addition of
with the
those
conditions.
other comments that were
Okay.
part of Darren's proposal.
Thank you. Any more comments? No? Okay. John, did you? No. You, okay. Let's move to the vote. Are we in? Did you? No?
No, so thank you for the additional comments. That would be covered when we say car park management, bus routing and travel plan. That's what we're saying, but absolutely useful to have it in the minutes. That is both the intention of the planning authority and the expectation of the committee. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, we've got a proposer and a seconder. We'll move to the vote. Those in favour? That's unanimous. Planning permission has been granted, and I'm looking forward to the developers' commitment to social value as things move forward.
Chair, an awful lot of the conditions are yet being discussed and developed. Is there any way in which the planning committee can have a look at them at any stage? Because some of them will involve, I know Ian won't be very happy with this, but it's a lot of conditions that we haven't seen.
Well, we have the headlines, don't we? And we discussed this yesterday briefly.
Yeah, we know there's no real practical method of doing that. Obviously, more than happy to update the committee on the final drafting of those conditions. But in terms of actually engaging in the negotiation of them, that's not really practical.
Okay, we move on. Well, we move on with an apology from me for my mispronunciation of St. Pyrons last time. Gerald.
Chairman, I'm sorry, I've got a meeting at 1 o'clock, so we'll need to disappear for that. I will try to come back after that, but I then have another meeting at 3:30, and I will try to come back then after 5 o'clock when you are still continuing.
Okay.
I compare this to the council meeting that did the council budget yesterday, which took 2.5 hours to decide on over £200 million. I hope we can move slightly swifter.
Well, the application we discussed, I think, required that amount of time, but we'll move on. Okay, St. Pyrons, which I hope I'm pronouncing correctly this time. My apologies last time. Ian, over to you.
Thank you. Number 49, there it is. This is an application for the change of use of what is currently or was last used as a C3 dwelling house to a dual purpose use, so either a C3 dwelling house or a C4 house in multiple occupancy. A number of alterations have of course occurred to it. Sorry, just checking my notes. Members will recall it was the 18th of January committee that this application was deferred from to undertake a site visit. That has been undertaken, attended by 2 members of this committee who comments are summarised in the SMAT. So the physical alterations are covered by permitted development. In this case, it was just the change of use of the building once complete that this committee is being asked to look at. So, as members will recall, the normal HMO considerations, so the mix and balance of the community, so ensure that we don't have a undue proliferation. There is only one other HMO within the 50 metre radius that's within your SPD guidance, so that's a 2.82% mix and balance of HMOs in this locality. And then in terms of the internal space being created and occupied, potentially as an HMO, you'll see the table on at paragraph 8.10, which details full compliance with your adopted standards for space from a planning perspective. So officers, when we look at both the layout of those standards and the size of those rooms, are satisfied makes a reasonable living environment. Probably a little more to say, Chairman, but happy to take any questions.
Okay, well, we have a few deputations before we get there. Mr. Tobbit. course. Mr. Leonard.
Yeah,
You have
yes.
6 minutes.
Just two things. Slightly disappointed with the site visit because we had hoped we could have been there. We would have put up a scaffold profile to show the extent and bulk of the proposed second floor. The second thing is for the planning officer. On one of your notes, it states that all the floor areas, etc., have got to comply. I just want to know why, when on the ground floor, which is permitted development, it's maximum 6 meters from the rear of the existing house, why the drawing shows 8 meters to obtain the necessary 34 square meters. Can you confirm, the planning department, that you have actually checked that the square meterage is obtainable with the 6-foot projection? Because if it isn't, then it is not permitted development. It is a planning application for the ground floor. That is it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'm sure Ian Maguire will answer that in due course. Mr. Tobbett, over to you.
Thank you. Firstly, I'd like to thank everyone that took the time to make the site visit. It is much appreciated. I have several issues regarding the HMO at 49 St Primrose Avenue. Firstly, the issue regarding sunlight into my garden and into my conservatory, as highlighted during your visit. As my property is to the north of number 49, I will lose sunlight to a considerable area of my garden due to the 3 metre high extension, as well as the change of profile to the main roof. It will put my property in shadow throughout the day. Also, my conservatory will be in darkness as the north side window of the conservatory is at a lower level than the proposed building at number 49. And the building will be at such close proximity that the sun will never get high enough to clear the extension roof. My garden is used throughout the summer, especially for my grandchildren, where they can play safely rather than out in the street. I also have an issue with privacy, as we will permanently be overlooked whilst in the garden, which makes me and my family feel uncomfortable to the extent that the garden will probably not be used as it should. I understand that a family living in number 49 could still overlook my garden, but they would not generally be based in one room with the only outlook to the gardens below. I'm also concerned with the noise, as my wife works from home 3 days a week and often has video conferences or online meetings. She's a mental capacity advocate dealing with vulnerable people, so she needs to be available at all times. The walls are so thin that we can hear a conversation next door or even the radio playing, so any loud noises would make it impossible for my wife to carry out her work. And with 6 unrelated residents next door, I feel this could be a major problem. There's also the chance of damage to my property, whilst the major demolitions and building work is being carried out at number 49. At the last meeting, it was mentioned that to achieve the headroom in the loft rooms at number 49, they would lower ceilings and floors. I've spoken to many builders about this, and it is a major structural work in a house that is in the centre of a row of fairly old and fairly average houses that were not built to take this sort of development. I've spoken to the young family at number 51, and it appears that they have already suffered some damage, as was shown on your site visit, and that was with the small amount of work that has been carried out so far. I also need to mention the parking, as in the evening it's impossible to park in St Primrose Avenue, and this will only get worse if the HMO goes ahead. There's also rubbish and the amount of bins that 6 people will have. They'll probably need to be housed into the forecourt, which will be unsightly, and the worst case scenario could cause a rodent issue. There's also the sewers and drainage problems that we could suffer. The main sewer runs under my garden, and also through number 49's garden. Will the footings required for the extension cause any issue to this? We don't know how deep they are. And if not, would the weight of the building be an issue? I'm not sure on this, but it is a fear that I have. St Primrose Avenue is a very diverse community with many pensioners, young families, some older families with grown-up children who all mix together, help each other as a proper community should. The whole street is against the HMO, as can be seen by the amount of objections received against this development. We have on several occasions discussed this issue, and one thing that always gets raised is that we feel Portsmouth need more family homes, and 49 will be ideal, where a young family could set up and stay for many years, exactly the same as the residents of St Pius have done already. I have lived at my property for over 25 years, and many in the street were there when I arrived. Our children have grown up there, and this is why we have such a sense of community, and we feel that this HMO development will be detrimental to this. If I may, I'd like to read a letter that I've got from number 51. Thank you for this opportunity to raise my concerns about number 49 St Pius Avenue becoming an HMO. For the first time in roughly 10 years, my children and I are not being disturbed by unreasonable noise levels from number 49. I've lost count of the number of times I've had to call the police, and the previous owner's noise and behaviour was despicable. In October, workmen entered the property, and the noise from the work they were doing was deafening. There was nowhere in my house we could get away from it. My son was unable to complete his college work, and my daughter was unable to revise for school because of the disruption. The work also made a crack in my hall ceiling by the party wall, as seen at the visit. If damage is caused to my property through the building work, my landlord will possibly blame me for the damage, and I'll run the risk of being evicted. I am very upset that I wasn't given an opportunity to object to the extension planned, as I wasn't informed about it, and I only found out about it when the planning permission was approved. This will overlook my garden, as will the extension into the roof, and make more bedrooms. If you approve the plan proposals, I will have no privacy in my garden. I'm also upset about not being informed about the site visit that happened on the 22nd of February. I thought one of the reasons for the visit was that the councillors wanted to see how it would affect the neighbours. Unfortunately, I was unable to get the time off work, so I couldn't tell you exactly how it would affect myself and my family. Finally, I would like to add about the parking in St Pius Avenue. It is horrendous every day of the week. I get home from work at 3:30 each day, and 9 times out of 10 I would have to park in a different street in the Baffins area. It is awful, at the weekend especially when Portsmouth are playing at home. This problem will only get worse with the extra car spaces needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Solomon. Councillor Sanders.
Thank you very much again, Chris. Seasoned veterans of this committee will have heard much of this before, so I'll try and only add a few things if I may. I support what Gary and Terry have said. I think the interesting thing, being on the site visit as an observer as opposed to a member of the committee, firstly were the cracks. The cracks in number 51. The cracks in the front wall, both on the side and over what I regard as the bit that was overhanging the entrance, which is, I'm sure, is a planning term for it. But there were cracks that were there, and they've not been there before. And they were there because of the work that is needed to turn this building into a HMO. We saw in number 49 that the walls were the walls and the gaps were 1 to 2 bricks thick. That's pretty narrow for a house, and increases, in my view, the realistic prospect of additional noise that would result from a HMO as opposed to a family home. The impact on highways is well known. I was delighted that some people could park in the road when they came. That doesn't normally happen, but it was 10 o'clock in the morning. That doesn't normally happen in the evenings and at weekends, as the highways officers have indicated in the report previously. So I think for me it is the amount of work required to turn the property into a HMO that will have a negative impact on the amenity of existing neighbours. And so if you haven't seen the cracks at number 51 as those on the site visit did, they are interesting and to me indicate possible subsidence, but I don't know. And I think also the impact, the fact the walls are as thin as was indicated in the previous deputations, suggests that actually the noise issue is a real one. And that's the amenity both of the neighbours and of future occupiers. And so it's that amenity impact that makes me continue to oppose this development. But that's not up to me now. That's up to you. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Darren. Mrs Wells, over to you.
Thank you. So, as you will be aware, this application was considered previously by members when the decision to defer the application for a site visit was made. Questions were raised during the previous meeting regarding the extension on this property. The approved 6-metre extension will have a flat roof finish. The loft and extension will be carried out under permitted development, regardless of the outcome of the change of use application you are considering today. As you may be aware, due to comments made previously, the previous tenants are alleged to have caused a great deal of impact to neighbouring properties. It could be argued that 6 individuals sharing a property, not in a family unit, would be less likely to cause the types of noise commonly attributed to family living, children, shouting, family gatherings, etc. Whilst I appreciate neighbours will have concerns, I do believe some of these are unfounded. Concerns were also raised about the potential increase in ridge height to enable a loft conversion. I can also confirm this will not be the case. The loft conversion will be fully compliant with all permitted development rules. The applicant is fully aware that if the loft is erected and is deemed to be non-compliant, the works may be subject to enforcement. As previously advised, the loft conversion extension will be carried out into permitted development and not included in this application. This application is for the change of use of the property, not the physical works. The HMO will be finished to a high standard and will be required to have weekly fire alarm checks and will be inspected regularly. This will ensure any possible issues will be promptly dealt with. The property will be professionally managed, and it would not be within the applicant's interest to allow the property to be poorly tenanted and poorly managed due to the time and money spent on renovating the property. It's also important to remember the 10% HMO density restriction has been put in place by Portsmouth City Council to ensure mixed and balanced and diverse communities remain. There is only one other HMO property barely within the 50-metre radius. Therefore, it can be argued there is a lack of shared properties available in this area for which there is a clear need. The property complies with PCS 17, PCS 20 and PCS 23 of the local plan, and also complies with the Houses and Multiple Occupation Supplementary Document 2019. The property provides 34.9 square metres of communal space at ground level, which meets the 34 communal space required. All the bedrooms within this property are larger than the 7.5 square metres required, with 2 of them exceeding 12 square metres. The Planning Officer has recommended this fully compliant application for approval today, and I respectfully request you agree with the Officer's recommendation. To refuse such a fully compliant application will only result in an increased workload, time and cost for all those involved in subsequently taking this to appeal. Thank you for listening. Thank you.
Thank you. Ian, before we go to members' questions, maybe you'd like to answer some of the points or some of the questions raised in the deputation.
Yes, provide some clarity on the depth of the rear extension. So the General Permitted Development Order allows rear extensions from the original rear wall. In this case, when the rear extension was approved under the prior notification process, the planning department satisfied itself that there was that conservatory rear wall is on the place of the original rear wall, so it's 6 metres beyond that, so the conservatory a couple of metres, and then the 6 metres that gives you an 8-metre reconstruction, but the first quarter of it is effectively absorbing an existing structure, so that's where I think that confusion quite understandably lies.
Thank you. Members, questions? Councillor Vernon Jackson.
Thank you. It was very interesting to go to the site visit, and thank you very much for your courtesy and extending that to us. I'm worried about the idea that we're building over a mains sewer, because I thought the idea was you needed to maintain access for the water company, however dodgy they are, to be able to do work on the sewers. Is that right, or are we able to build all over the sewer network?
You're able to grant planning permission to build all over the sewer network. Whether or not that will pass building regulation approval and what amendments or tweaks will be needed to it is a matter for the building regs commission, not the planning committee.
Okay, thank you. Second question. One of the things that is noticeable on this plan is that on the ground floor there is a room which is defined as lounge, of which there is an ensuite bathroom. Now that, I may be hugely cynical or marginally suspicious, but my concern would be that that would become bedroom number 7 very quickly, because there's also a downstairs loo on the plan as well, so it's not the need for a loo, it is there as a bathroom, a shower room, etc. What powers do we have to make sure that that doesn't become the use as a bedroom if I was a cynical person?
None whatsoever would be the short answer. Clearly, the council can impose conditions on the grant of a planning permission if there are planning reasons to do so. So previously, for example, where a scheme would not meet minimum room sizes, communal living space in particular, without the provision of a separate lounge, it's been deemed appropriate to impose a condition to require the retention of that separate lounge to meet that minimum room size, is a sound planning reason. In this case, whether or not that lounge is provided makes no difference to your adopted standards because the full provision of communal space is provided not in the lounge, that's a bonus room, but in the combined kitchen dining space. Furthermore, I would point out, if they had applied, and I absolutely share your cynicism, in fact disappointment, that there appears to be some sort of oddity in this, if they had shown that as a 7th bedroom with an ensuite bathroom, which does fully comply with all of your standards, including your communal living space, it would have received the same recommendation from officers because your communal living space requirements for 7 beds is the same as 6 beds. So why it's been shown in this way, other than for future flexibility, it's very hard to say, but I can see no planning reason why we would be concerned with its future conversion into a 7th bedroom, as it meets all of your standards for a 7-bed HMO in the same way it does for 6.
Councillor Mason.
Following that, would it have to come back to this committee if they were to move from a C4 house to a sui generis house? And presumably we would have to consider it then. I find this Trojan horse to be rather unpleasant. Is there any way we can therefore say that we would accept this HMO provided that the ground floor toilet and shower room were removed?
To try and answer some of those points in order, I mean, no would be the answer because there would be no planning reason to require less showers. Yes, they have an excess of showers, one could argue, at the moment, but there would be no planning reason to say that you can't have more showers and toilets than you have rooms. So again, I can't see that would be a reasonable condition to impose. To the general question, as it changed from a 6-occupant to a 7-occupant HMO, going back to planning committee, that's a matter of planning judgment. So as and when that may happen will be dependent on whether we're looking at an enforcement case, how that 7th occupant is provided, or indeed whether a planning application has come in so to judge it on its merits.
Judith.
Looking at the proposed ground floor, unless I'm badly out of date, I think it is something, there is a building regulations problem, which isn't a planning problem, it will turn into one, as I say, in that you're not allowed to have a lavatory letting straight onto a kitchen area. You have to have 2 doors. No, you don't. You don't anymore? That used to be a rule, didn't it?
I think you may be confusing landlord and tenant rules compared to building regulation rules.
So it is not the case that they would have to put a door in the north, further down, to give 2-door protection between a lavatory and a kitchen.
Chair, we wandered beyond planning here, so there's a limitation.
No, I haven't, because that would reduce the size of the living space, and I wondered if that would make any difference in planning terms.
No would be the short answer.
Okay. Councillor Simpson.
As we move into comments, because mine's more a comment than a question.
Well, if there are no more questions, we'll move into comments.
I'm actually quite disappointed with this application. One of the reasons really is because when it came last time, we actually did pick up on this lounge and this ensuite. And if you actually look at the requirements, the communal kitchen dining is just there. And I kind of feel this is a really missed opportunity that they could have lost. I mean, you could still put one toilet there, but they could have maybe had that going straight through and created a better living space. We always talk about having better living spaces in HMOs, better living for people that live in HMOs. And the fact that we mentioned this last time and it wasn't heard, and they put it in again, just shows, as has been pointed out, it's a Trojan horse for a seventh room. I just feel it's really disingenuous.
Thank you. Councillor Vernon Jackson.
Thank you. And to build on what Russell has said, one of the things that was interesting going around and looking is in the front bedroom, which becomes front room, which becomes bedroom 1, they are removing the existing wall between the rooms and making that room smaller, because then that it means that the lounge, or bedroom 7 as we should call it, then becomes a size for a bedroom. There is, I am really suspicious of this, I'm sorry to say, and I don't look on this in any way positively. I would like to, I know we are highly limited in what we are able to do, but the piece of new information for me is the idea of building over the sewer, and therefore I'd like to propose refusal on the basis that that would disadvantage being able to look after the sewer and the public good, and that. But if that doesn't find favour, I would ask colleagues that a condition is put on that a maximum of 6 people may live in this building and no more, which we have done several times before recently, and I'm pleased that we have done that before, and I know it's against the officer's recommendation, but we've done it, and I would hope that we would follow that.
Okay, comments? Any further comments? Oh, Ian, sorry.
If there are no member, just to come back on those 2 points. Again, building regulations and the other utility management deals with the sewer question. It is out with the control of this planning committee. Not only would it be unlikely, well, no, impossible, I would go far to say, to be upheld on appeal, you're likely to be walking straight into costs for taking into account a non-material consideration. I cannot stress strongly enough why that would be a poor reason for refusal in professional recommendation. The 6-person restriction, if you wish to impose that condition, it is within your gift, it is a judgment for this committee. You will need, as well as saying you want to do it, to provide a planning reason for that condition that we can impose upon the decision notice. As noted above, it isn't a space standard one. Your space standards for 7 is the same as for 6, so that wouldn't be a legitimate justification. And if it then led to an appeal, as I would expect it would, it's that planning reason that will be judged on appeal. So we'll need a planning reason for that condition as well as the condition itself.
Trojan horse or not, our job is to consider material planning reasons.
Well, I'm waiting to see if I get a seconder for my original proposal for refusal.
Russell?
I'll second that proposal.
Okay. Any further comments or thoughts? Well, we have a proposal on the table. I shall move the officer's recommendations.
I think Ian was just waiting for a planning reason for the imposition of the second condition.
Well, apologies, but say we have a motion proposed and seconded, surely the vote on that, and then obviously see whether Councillor Atwell's motion would get a seconder, whether or not any amended to conditions.
We haven't had a seconder yet. Oh, okay. Thank you, John. Okay, so we'll, unless there's anything else anybody wants to add, we'll vote on the proposal by Councillor Vernon Jackson and seconded by Councillor Simpson to refuse. Those in favour of that motion? Those against? Okay, I think that's everyone.
That motion has fallen.
Thank you, Juliet. So we move on to the officer's recommendations to grant permission.
And can I ask that we do put a condition on that it is 6 people only, and for the reason that more in that property would be significant overdevelopment.
Members, it is your judgment how you wish to phrase your issues. With all due respect, it is significant overdevelopment is not a interrogable planning reason. Obviously, if this goes to appeal, the committee will have to nominate a member to go along and give evidence and explain what that means. As I say, the density of occupants to space, your space standards, it isn't overdevelopment, it's within that adopted space standard. So if there's a different meaning to overdevelopment you're implying to those words, you would benefit from articulating it for the minutes so that the applicant, should they wish to make an appeal, will be able to deal with that.
Sorry, just to confirm, Councillor Outwell has put forward the officer's recommendation. I don't know if you've accepted.
Well, I just want to see what colleagues
Councillor.
might think about that. No appetite for accepting that recommendation. Okay, so we move to vote on the officer's recommendations.
We need a seconder.
Do we have?
Oh,
John?
sorry.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, those in favour? Those against? And abstentions?
Planning
Okay.
permission has been granted.
Okay, thank you, Julia. Okay, do members want a 5-minute leg stretch?
Chair, can I ask, I'm conscious that we have 3 members of the public here who are here to do deputations on something, and all the other deputations are from professionals. I wonder if we could change the order of business to see if we could have the application where members of the public are here before we do the others where there are just professionals who are coming to do deputations.
Well, we're going to change the order anyway. If you want to have a leg stretch, anyway, I need to go and do something. We can come back and change the order.
Thank you.
5 minutes, everyone.
Chair, 5 minutes has become a long, long time.
No, well, we've got, Councillor Sanders needs a coffee. Which
Well,
is one, and,
he had 5 minutes, it's now 15 minutes.
well, I know. Okay. All right, okay. Members. I'm aware you have a meeting to go to as well.
Well,
Okay, welcome back, everyone. We're going to change the running order for part 2, let's call it. So we'll do Shed 9 at the Camber first, and then we'll move on to Hartley, Shadwell, Porchester, and we'll finish with Highbury Way, because Councillor Sharp won't be able to take part in that debate. So, Ian, over to you for Shed 9.
Thank you. So Shed 9, the Camber refurbishment of the fish market. So I'm sure members are aware of the fish market building on the Camber. It is not a particularly interesting building despite the heritage of this location. Plans are relatively straightforward. Fundamentally, what we're looking at here is a external freezer room, which is the rectangle on the bottom of the plan in front of you, which is in a location behind a wall along the road where previously we understand a storage container may have been placed. There's also on the front of the building, at the top of the image you see a disabled access ramp, which all goes to some internal configuration, and fundamentally that's really what this scheme is about, if I may. It is sort of slightly changing its presentation from a more industrial space to a larger and more inviting retail space for the new owner's new intention. That's the site. You can so there's the shipping container no longer in situ, roughly where the external freezer room would go. Top is the existing, bottom is as proposed. We have already dealt with some applications on this site where that couple is standing in front of a window is a new kiosk window that's already been approved as an alteration, going towards, as I say, this more retail-focused intent. And as you can see, fundamentally, a somewhat uninspired building as is. I don't wish to be offensive to it, but they are proposing a much more open design, both accessible in terms of that ramp, but also larger windows, etc., to meet that new function. The largest structure is, as I say, is the external freezer room, which is in this area in the photograph, so the bottom left photograph, so behind that wall. The wall's about 2.5 metres, the freezer room is about 3 metres, so it'll stick a couple of feet up above the wall, but the wall obviously does provide both some visual and sound attenuation, and otherwise sound attenuation will be achieved with additional soundproof fencing, which our environmental health colleagues have found to be acceptable. There's a zoom in there on the proposed floor plans, should members wish to see them, but otherwise I'll leave you with that image of the existing building that obviously is to be changed in this proposal. A large number of comments, 5 objections, 7 comments of support, so obviously a degree of local contention, as you often get in these sorts of locations where you have obviously residential and commercial next to each other, and pros and cons undeniably between such changes.
Thank you, Ian. Oh, we have some deputations. Are you? So who's speaking? So Mr. Barker's speaking first. You have 12 minutes to share between you. So if you can work that out amongst yourselves, 4 minutes each or thereabouts. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, members. Good afternoon. My name is Chris Barker. I'm Managing Director of EC Planning. We work all across the southeast of England with offices in Worthing, but actually have dealt with many applications in Portsmouth, including working on the Gunwharf Quays project, so I know the Camber very well. The application before you relates to the refurbishment of the existing fish market to improve its functionality and appearance, including the provision of new and updated chiller cold rooms with the associated plant equipment. The fish market is a historic use, as you all know, with the existing building and operations dating back to the 1970s and beyond. It should be noted that the refrigeration equipment that was on the roof of the existing building had been in situ for over 40 years and had been maintained by the same contractor. You've seen that on the plans of the existing buildings. The residential properties adjacent to the camber who have been making representations are not, however, as historic and were introduced in the 1990s into a fully functional quayside that contains an eclectic mix of long-standing fishery and commercial uses, which you all know. Any effects on the residential occupiers must therefore be considered under what's called the agent of change principles, whereby residential uses should not fetter the ability of historic commercial operations to be undertaken, particularly in relation to reasonable noise conditions for those commercial operators. The proposals will replace outdated refrigeration and condenser units with modern equipment that will produce lower noise levels than the plant that existed. It should be noted that no noise-related complaints had arisen from the historic operations and equipment sited on the market roof. The proposed refrigeration units and condensers are of the highest specification and will be screened by acoustic fencing, as you've seen on the officer's presentation, and have been assessed by independent consultants to produce a level of noise at the nearest residential property between 11 and 16 decibels lower than the existing background noise level. That's the existing level of noise just as ambient background noise. The conclusions of our report are clear, and I will state them. Given the degree that the rating level is below the existing background sound level, the degree of unlikelihood for adverse impact is significant. No complaints will be generated. The assessment has also shown that the rating level of the proposed plants at the nearest properties is significantly below the representative background sound level. Based on this information, the planning application should not be withheld on noise grounds. The proposals clearly, therefore, present a material improvement on the existing noise situation, and this will be controlled fully through the use of planning condition, as drafted as condition 4 in your officer's report. In this regard, we have been working collaboratively with the Council and will continue to do so to ensure no harm is caused to residential amenity of the neighbouring residents. The Environmental Health Officer is entirely content that the proposals can be designed to fully protect the amenities of neighbouring residents. It is also entirely pertinent to this application that permissions were granted in 2011 and 2015 for changes to the fish market and its refrigeration plant. No objections were sustained at that time. It is not considered that the situation has changed materially, and indeed the proposed plant will be materially quieter than that proposed in the earlier permissions. Further to the above issues over noise, the proposals will refurbish the existing facilities to provide a significant visual improvement to the benefit of neighbours and the conservation area more widely, as you've seen from the photos today. We trust, therefore, that you will appreciate fully the benefits of our proposals, and they will provide the following tangible benefits. The proposals would boost the fishing economy in the area, including maximising the value for small businesses, fishermen, restaurants and logistics companies. The refurbishment would bring back into use this valuable local resource, providing for up to 6 new jobs. The refurbishment would enhance the site visually to the benefit of the conservation area and the amenity of local residents to the noise reduction. In this regard, the proposals have received significant support from local businesses and the residential community, who praise the refurbishment of the building to bring greater vitality to the quayside employment opportunities in this location. Regeneration of this area is critical. I hope, therefore, you'll be able to support your officer's strong recommendation of approval today and grant consent for the reasons set out above. Thank you.
Thank you. Paula.
Hi, my name, most of you know, is Paula Riches, and actually today is for me a pleasure to be in this committee room to actually support an application. For 8 years I spent my life objecting. On many occasions I objected not with my heart, but because I had to. But today I am so delighted to be here to support this application. I want to support this application of the refurbishment of the existing Camber, fish market at the Camber, which will, as mentioned, improve the wheelchair accessibility for people who struggle now to be able to go in and buy their fish. The new doors, I believe, will be sliding, which will also make it easier for those people to access the building. Due to the new windows, it was obviously be not light and airy. At the moment, it's very dark, but you will be able to also see from the outside what's on offer. And I have to say, what is being offered at the moment is absolutely fantastic. You really should go down and see the presentation of the fish, and in various guises as they're almost an art form. It's lovely. I have lived on the Camber for 25 years and I've represented St Thomas's Ward for 8 of those years. And from my experience, the issues around the Camber and the fish market have been incredibly negative. It has been blighted in the past by the organisation who cared for it before. And it is of interest to me that a new company has come to the Camber with wonderful ideas, thoughts, and engaging. They are engaging not only with staff, they are engaging with the local community. Bill, who is the owner, I spoke to him. I thought it would be a good idea to go and meet. I met him and his son on the quayside and informed them of a project that we have down in Old Portsmouth to try and stop the young people from jumping into the Camber near the BAR building and the hot walls. They immediately said they wished to be on that board. So we now, one of them or both of them, attend all the meetings we have to see what we can do to stop the young people from hurting themselves, or just trying to make sure that we can put something in place which will possibly encourage them to go elsewhere would be lovely, but to make sure that there are safe places for them to go. I don't really need to say a great deal more, except that it is just such a pleasure to see how clean the place is. It was disgusting before. It was filthy. We had engines and fishing gear or in the area where they're going to be putting the new storage. It was infested with rats. I spent a lot of my time as a councillor speaking to officers about the state of the Camber in this area and the fish market. Nothing, I can honestly say, was ever done. And it is a delight. Within a week, they started working on cleaning up the area. And for any of you who would like to go and have a look, please do. It's a treat to do that. I think Mr. Barker has been good enough to give all the relevant professional advice. But for me, I hope you all think seriously about this application. I'm not too sure why it's come to committee, but I hope you realise that it's for the benefit of the city that we have such a wonderful new fish market, which I believe will continue with the new owners. So that's all I really have to say, and thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you very much. Members, any questions? Councillor Simpson and then Sanders.
Anticipation here. What time will this fish bar open and close? That's the first question. Okay, but what time? Sorry, what time was it open and shut? Just as a question.
The retail aspect.
No, but sorry, I will get to my point later.
You'll have to bear with me. I don't believe you put a condition on limiting that.
No, I'm just curious of the time.
So yeah, bear with me. I'll have a look at their application.
Also, the condenser units. I'm guessing there's condenser units already there now. No, there isn't. So, but you have something that makes noise from that area already. Yes, that's fine. That's fine. I'll get to my point later in comments. Okay.
Okay, Councillor Sanders.
Thanks, Chris. I just wanted to talk through two of the objections that have been made. First is the view of the Camber will be blocked. I mean, how much higher is this block than what's being proposed and it exists now? And is it going to block the view?
Yeah, I would anticipate that's obviously the installation of the external freezer room, which at the moment it's mostly behind a wall, but it does stick up 50 centimetres above that wall, and obviously it's a long building as well, so depending on where you take your viewpoint, it is a structure in an area that doesn't have a current building in it, albeit it does have a wall on one side.
So it's pretty much it's 50 centimetres above what it is now, pretty much. Okay. The other thing was around the placement of the freezer room will prevent access and stop vehicles turning. In the report, I didn't see a detailed analysis of this objection, but how?
Put the presentation back on. It's obviously like a lot of commercial quaysides, there is a number of activities and movements. You can see from these photographs, bottom left is a good example, when there isn't fishing equipment or a storage container or other movable structures that obviously could go into that space, it does provide a space where a vehicle could turn. It's not the public land, it's the ownership of the land, so obviously they could fence it off and do all sorts of things anyway to it, I'm sure. But yes, by definition, if you put buildings in spaces that are currently open and have vehicular access from the quayside in this case, then it would have that implication. The broader implications for the area are effectively nil, as being a piece of public land at some distance from the public highway, from a vehicle point of view at least. So it hasn't been analysed by officers, as we don't consider that to be a material planning consideration.
Thanks, Ian. So essentially it's an area whereby vehicles are turning, but that wasn't the intention of the developer, it's just something that's happened. Is that reasonable, Ian?
I can't say whether they are turning, I can say they would be capable of turning.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Smythe.
I'd be grateful if you could just, there are these slides and maybe the one before this, I'd just like a little bit of explanation. I'm delighted the facility is being improved because I used to go a lot and then haven't been recently. But could you just explain? They don't have any. It doesn't have any annotation, any titles. View from this direction, view from that direction, and I can't quite work it out visually. And are they existing or?
This is an existing. Do we take these photographs or?
Yes, please.
So these are obviously existing photographs. This top left is obviously looking with the area where the external freezer, so the southern part of the fish market, would be provided. That is on the right-hand side of that top left image. So the illuminated wall, rather than the wall in shadow, is the southern wall in front of which the freezer would be built. Moving to top right, same illuminated wall, as you can see the freezer would be there, looking through to the Camber and the BIR building beyond. Obviously, if one was to stand here when the external freezer building is constructed, it would obstruct your view through that space. But obviously, whether that's material or not is a judgment. Bottom left, same as the top right, just probably 8 steps backwards, I think. So you can see the boundary wall and the bollards that block it off from the highway there. And then the bottom right is moving to the northern end of the site, then looking down the length of the road and the highway. So what you can't see is the space for the freezer building, which would be effectively the opposite end of the building from where you're standing here.
Thank you very much. And although it's mentioned in the report, could you just, as I frequently walk the seafront, and is there any change to the pedestrian access to the side of the Camber between the building and the Camber?
No, the alterations are to the south and to the northern frontage, and obviously windows, as I say, on this elevation on the bottom right here, where there's those small windows, they'd be opened up and have already been extended for the kiosk, but the rest of the building is unaltered in this scheme.
Alteration to the coastal path, in other words. No, thank you very much.
Any news on the retail?
So the opening hours are 7 a.m. till 3 p.m. At the moment. They've expressed no. That's what they are at the moment in the application form. They've expressed no intent to amend those. However, equally in light of an established commercial use, we're not proposing it would be reasonable to put any conditions on that. So clearly, as an operational choice, they could change that in the future.
Are we straying into comments?
Yeah, if that's okay, if no one's got any more questions. The reason I asked this is a whopping 22 years ago. I used to work at the American Bar, which is now called Our Bar Bistro, which is opposite it. It doesn't make any impact. It's just, from my memory, they had very strict rules that by, I want to say 9:30, they were not allowed to have anyone outside because the neighbours always complained about the noise. And when I say, like anything after 9:30, even if you moved a chair and it's slightly scraped, there'd be a complaint straight away. I feel that in this case, the complaints is just trying to stop good development just because it's different. And I want to put an officer's recommendation for this application.
Thank you very much. Okay. You're seconding? Councillor Symes is seconding. Councillor Vernon Jackson first, and then John.
I was going to do the same.
Let's do the same.
That's fine.
There you are. Your thunder was stolen.
Yeah, Chair, I was going to move the motion, functionality, appearance, the ACU high spec and all of those things, visual improvement, the business improvement with the jobs and things like that, and disabled access and overall tidiness. I think it's a good scheme. So.
Thank you. Okay, unless there are any other thoughts and ideas, we will move to a vote. Those in favour of the motion in front of us? Those, well, it's everybody. No. Thank you, Julia. Okay. Hartley Road.
Chair, I'm going to disappear.
Thank you, Gerald. Councillor Simpson, you're going to give a deputation on this afterwards, yeah? Okay. Just to get, so you're able to be prepared. I said, we'll do the presentation.
Thank you. 36 Hartley Road. This is an application for the change of use from a dwelling house, Class C3, to a 7-occupant HMO. There is the dwelling house on the north side of Hartley Road. There is the existing and proposed elevations. As we are used to seeing, a number of permitted development extensions have already been proposed and indeed partly delivered as part of this scheme. Therefore, existing and proposed, though again the physical layout of the externals are not for this committee today, they are dealt with under permitted development, to change the use to 7 bedrooms. The change of use results in a 1.75% mix of HMOs, so well within the 10% that your guidance allows. And your floor sizes are detailed, the room sizes, apologies, are detailed in paragraph 5.7 on page 55 and fully meet the adopted standards. And furthermore, the layout is considered to be a reasonable and sensible one for future occupants. Consequently, it's considered to be fully compliant with your policies and recommended for approval.
Thank you. Russell?
So I'm reading deputation for Henry Thorpe.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for allowing this. And before I start, I will confirm that this is not my opinion, because I always know that's what, from a law point of view, they always want me to confirm. So, sadly, I cannot be with you today, as I've had to switch my day off work to Thursday due to teacher strikes and childcare issues. The eroding of the family home community supports of North are my primary objection. I am concerned the council has lost control of HMOs and has constantly failed to push the Planning Policies Committee into reform. You prefer to blame each other and central government. I must thank the former chairman for at least calling a meeting to try and make progress, and note now she is out of the chair, raising a number of core issues at the last meeting, such as the sound, structural modification, outdoor living space, communal spaces shrinking, and in the middle of property, etc. She even last time questioned why a delegated decision to allow an out-of-proportion extension, which was approved by the council officer. I can answer her question. It's a failure by this committee to review even a sample of delegated decision or define a policy to advise officers to protect outdoor living spaces and take more consideration of neighbouring properties. Placing more super HMOs into Margate Road shows not only the policy is flawed, but so is your committee decision-making process, which should have added the more common sense. I wouldn't worry about the planning inspectorate, keep them busy until they can read and apply policy. It would be highly unlikely for costs to be added if you simply access against your own approved SPD and if they did send in the MPs. Central government have a lot to blame have a lot to be blamed for in terms of foul promise to its membership on local planning control, the unintended consequence of permitted development, and most annoyingly, the planning inspectorate terms of reference. It should be monitoring, not deciding without recourse. But who from the PCC is providing the MP with the technical specialist support to push for reform on these issues? Surely HMO could trial additional planning restrictions, and Portsmouth would be an ideal trial area due to this population density and, to that matter, HMO density. It doesn't have the same infrastructure as London by a very long way, or even the space or financial support to properly implement radical infrastructure reforms to reduce reliance on the car with mass transit systems. Have you tried to get a job in an industrial estate on the edges of Gosport, Fareham or Whiteley from the North End using public transport? We don't all ride bikes to work in South. We don't all ride bikes to work in Southsea. In fact, I suspect most of Hillsey don't. What frustrates me more is your failure is to tackle the things you have control of. Fundamentally, your own space standards are allowing this to happen, yet you haven't changed them. These space standards, such as communal space, are not even directly linked to occupancy. It's just madness. Again, an officer applied these to 16-bedroom HMO and had to admit they didn't work, but never flagged it to the committee. You could stop this madness by making the communal space unachievable with achievable development in period terrace housing, for example. I would also encourage you to cut out a piece of paper at your minimum room, then put a bed, wardrobe, desk, chair and bedside table into it. As you now have a planning policy advisor, it's clear the answer lies in the planning specific policy for period terrace housing that physically limits the occupancy based on its community surrounding. All the recent developments are not about design good living environment, they are purely about maximising profits, else they wouldn't be so intensely developed and the communal space would always have the garden outlook, etc. Limiting occupancy jointly via licensing, as it is effectively a use restriction, not a physical development building, also makes sense. For the residents of Hartley Road, I have no hope of chances of the application being rejected, hence making my general points on this application. So as a final plea, if approved, please limit the occupancy to 5 people. This is in line with the planning policy and the recent planning inspect decisions for 13 and 15 Shadwell Road, which was upheld by Councillor Vernon Jackson, whose excellent regular contribution to this committee must be commended. By way of including an occupancy limitation below, the use class definition limit of which validity is constantly being questioned. It basically said you can set a limit based on the plans in front of you, not taking into consideration what they're actually going to build because of permitted development. This is great, as the limitation forces some degree of honesty into their application in the submitted plans.
Thank you, Russell. Thank you, Mr. Thorpe, for submitting his deputation. Members?
Hold on.
Oh, sorry. Yes, of course. I've got the issue. Sorry, Mrs. Well, sorry. I was recovering from some of the comments.
Thank you. So as you're aware, the property has been considered by committee members previously, where the decision was made to refuse the application due to fire concerns. Private sector housing commented on the rear ground floor bedroom as being an issue and used the term inner room. This particular term, I believe, is confusing, was not helpful for members to be able to determine the application on that day. The term inner room is sometimes used to describe a room where escape is only possible by passing through another room. In this case, it's clearly shown the rear ground floor bedroom has direct access into the garden via proposed double doors. A means of escape window would also be a suitable option in this case. In addition to this, 36 Hartley Road will also benefit from rear access into the alleyway behind, which provides additional fire safety, whilst also providing the residents with the rear access for cycles. This HMO will be finished to a high standard, will be required to have weekly fire alarm checks and will be inspected regularly. It would not be within the applicant's interest to allow the property to be poorly tenanted and poorly managed due to time and money spent on renovating the property. Again, this application complies with policy PCS 17, PCS 20 and PC 23 of the local plan, and also complies with housing multiple occupation supplementary planning document. Portsmouth City Council cannot currently meet the 5-year supply, therefore approving this application will positively contribute to this shortage. To approve this application will provide a high-quality shared home for 7 individuals. This application is for a change of use from C3 residential to a 7-bedroom sui generis HMO. The property provides 24.51 square metres of communal space at ground floor level for eating and dining, which exceeds the 22.5 communal space required. All the bedrooms within this property are larger than 10 square metres and all benefiting from an ensuite bathroom. The planning officer has recommended this fully compliant application for approval today, and I respectfully request you agree with the officer's recommendation. In terms of Henry Thorpe's objection, I just wanted to note that in this particular area there are no other HMOs. HMOs have a vital contribution to make in the city. Policies have been put in place to prevent oversaturation of HMOs. So whilst I appreciate he has concerns, I think this is he's more looking at the South Sea area where those roads are already saturated. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. Okay, questions?
Oh, Chair, we've got...
Are you giving a deputation?
Yeah, he's on your list.
Right. It was just called in, didn't say you could...
Yeah, no, but, yeah.
Well, it's very lovely to see you. Carry on.
Thank you, Councillor Atwell. You've thrown me off my stride now. No, it's just obviously this application, as you know from your papers, has 13 objections and a resident-led petition of 107 people that have signed. I mean, I just welcome any member if they have been able to scan through and understand the strength and the feeling that the residents do have. They're concerns of ordinary residents, people who live on that road, and they just want to be listened to. I mean, the issues with this application, I'm just going to go through below, that they've discussed with me, and I've had lengthy discussions with a lot of residents in Hartley Road, shall I say. They're talking about inadequate parking for residents. I mean, there's already a parking issue in this road. This road is quite significantly different, and I know the parking SPD is very difficult to sustain on appeal, but the neighbouring streets already have to use neighbouring streets already for parking due to the fact that half the road is actually dropped curb. So if you actually walk down the road, you have one side of it is dropped curb, and then you walk down the other side of the road, it is also dropped curb. And I'm sure Councillor Simpson will be able to testify that today. He's nodding, so I've got an agreement there, which I'm happy about. Obviously, the concern is about the scale of the development beyond what residents would call as necessary. 3 stories, a large rear extension of property with no rear access or indeed no driveway. To them, that's inexcusable. It allows obviously the tenants to overlook and stops people to have a right to a private life. There also is a great deal of noise and disturbance as a concern, especially to the elderly residents, and also the visual impact it will have on the road compared to the other properties. You know, these roads are significantly different in Hilsey to what any other road is, as you say, and I think if you went down those roads, you would know what I would mean by that, and I'm sure one of my ward colleagues who's on the committee would be able to articulate that later and understand what I'm saying. Furthermore, I mean, I just agree with several residents I've spoken to. I understand their concerns. I don't believe that the HMOs overall are the issue. It's the scale of the development and ensuring that, I mean, I just don't know how we can justify these applications as they are at the moment and why not impacting on people's ability to go about their business. I've said my bit. We've already been here on Hartley Road before. I think it was before your time, Chair. So I just want to say thank you to the members for listening.
Thank you. Okay, questions? No questions. Councillor Sanders.
Yes, we refused it on grounds of inadequate amenity space for the person in proposed person in bedroom 6. All I can see on that is in a drawing on page 3 is bedroom 6 to have means of escape to rear access for fire escape. I'm a bit confused about that. I'd be grateful for some clarification. Like, how is it going to work?
So, apologies, the change to the agenda running has meant I skipped a bit in my presentation. So, yes, the committee looked at this on the 9th of November. The committee didn't decide the application. It was under appeal for non-determination at the time, so it was a would-have decision. The concern was effectively a building regulation concern about a means of escape. Partly from recollection, this was actually due to some confusion in the plans, whether a rear access was provided. So whether the exit had to be through the kitchen, which obviously, understandably, from a building regulation point of view, would be of concern, obviously of no relevance to planning. That has now been clarified. There is double doors out into the rear garden. There is absolutely, it's an excessive amount of fire escape, if you will, for that residence. So that concern, albeit it wasn't a planning one in the first place, is nevertheless resolved. There is no risk to bedroom 6, that bedroom to the rear of the property, from a fire issue. They have a large rear set of double doors to escape into the garden.
Does that help? Okay. Members, anything else before we move to comments? Russell?
Last time this came up, I commented on the fact that this road is it's a family road. We are starting to lose family roads. I feel they're really important. There are lots and lots of HMOs in the south of the city. They are coming up in the north city. We don't quite have the same infrastructure as the south city. The local transport's not particularly great, and people have more cars. However, there is a lot of drop curbs. But my concern really here is, I always believe when you come to a party, you bring something, not take away. And last time the application came, it was for C3 to C4, which essentially was asking for 6. We were concerned about the fire doors. We were expecting it most likely to come back with that being changed to accommodate our concerns. But instead, they've decided to add another room. And I just feel it's greed. It's pure greed. You've allowed here, before, you are having 6 bedrooms, but then you're at least having a lounge as well at the front, which you can break away. It just gives people more space, better quality living. And they've come back and thought, you know what, we'll just make that into a bedroom. And I really don't approve of it. I do think it's too many people in one house. We can't have applications that's coming in, squeezing that many people every time, when originally it was going to be 6. It's just not acceptable.
Thank you. Of course, we operate within material planning matters. Any other comments from members? No? Okay, I shall move the officer's recommendation. I think that's been seconded by Councillor Smith. Any other views or considerations? Councillor Mason.
Whilst in many ways I'm unhappy with this, at least it is an honest recommendation, honest proposal, that it admits there being 7. It is not a Trojan horse at this stage, and it does provide adequate communal living. So I would, with some reservations, I will support this.
Councillor Sanders.
On a slightly separate point, I think that we are looking at the local plan at the moment, and obviously the HMOSPD will form part of that. And I think some of the policy issues that Henry raises in his objection, because it really isn't about this, I think are things we can mull over as we trundle forwards, and I hope we will.
Absolutely. Okay, unless there's anything else, we'll move to the vote. So those in favour of the proposal, against, and I don't think there are any abstentions.
Planning permission is granted as per the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Julia. Okay, Shadwell Road.
Thank you. 51 Shadwell Road. This is the change of use of a C3 dwelling house to a either or dual use C3 dwelling house or C4 HMO. There it is, south side of Shadwell Road. You can see there next to the blurred out property. Again, one other HMO in the locality, meaning that the mix produced here will be 2.81%, well below the 10%. Usual series of permitted development extensions to provide additional space, as members have seen many times before. The room sizes, in this case, are covered in paragraph 8.10 and fully meet your minimum room sizes across the scheme. The more eagle-eyed amongst members will notice that the annotation of the drawings in the report, and indeed here, do not match those numbers we've put into the table. For some reason, the agent has incorrectly annotated his drawings, and pretty much every bedroom is described as 10.000 square metres. That's not true. We've gone through and, as we always do, manually check those, and while two of them are 10 metres, one's 10.43, one's 10.4, and we've corrected those errors. So we are satisfied from a actual inspection of the plans and correcting of the applicant's poor presentation. All of these rooms do meet the minimum necessary sizes to allow for a smaller communal area, which is now 24.46 compared to our standard of 22.5. Members may again note a additional living room, which is of benefit to the scheme, though itself at 10.3 is capable of being a future bedroom, which should a future operator of this site wish to pursue that, as we so often see through these proposals. Probably nothing else for me to add other than fully compliant with policy and recommended for approval.
Thank you, Ian. Councillor Simpson.
I have another deputation by Henry. This is not my own views, so I know that's what you want me to say. So 3 or 4 years ago, the residents of this and surrounding roads signed a petition. I jointly arranged opposing any more HMOs. It showed the scale of the issue in this and the surrounding roads, not the micro-community of 50-metre radius, and provided very detailed objections to the application on Oriel and Shadwell Road. As it made no difference, I haven't updated these stats, but we are now at well over 20 HMO within a 500-metre radius with a flood of application pending and some in build. In this case, we have sandwiching not as defined in the SPD, i.e. next door, but one neighbour now sandwiched with one in front of them and one behind. When I started my representation, we had none and none planned, but I was appalled with the way the committee dealt with 13 and 15 Shadwell Road and wanted to get changes in place before it directly affected me. I could see the community effects with one approved in our road the year prior with police, knife crime, immigration control, drug busts, etc., all linked to a new HMO. Our community is losing its family appeal due to policies by this council. This was evident at Halloween when we ended up walking to neighbouring Copner. The council protected the community in the 90s from flat conversions through a sound implementation of a space standard, a little too late for some roads, and now seems unable to protect family housing stock from HMOs. All new development within the city is small subdivided flats. Just look at what you have considered for Tipner East prison site and hospital site. There is a repeated failure by the planning department to correctly assess permitted development or educate them. The area of permitted development in the roof space is linked to the original not current floor plan. You can see by the overhead views later extensions have been added which has already used up the permitted development rights. 2. The amount of increase is limited by volume. By lowering the floors, the loft volume is increased, for example. This has not been looked at. 3. The dormer isn't allowed on the external wall but must be set back. If they are claiming dispensation for a structural reason, that is fine, but they shouldn't be allowed to include that area. Do you really think removing all the chimney breasts, knocking the bedroom ceiling down, having limited heat insulation and putting that many people into a communal space is a good idea. It's just going to have social issues both internally and to the wider community. I would also like you to seriously consider parking in this case. There is no mixed use like Southsea. It is a nightmare in the evening. There was a death last year at the end of the road, caused, I suspect, due to takeaway delivery drivers parked all over the curbs and parking restriction. I have seen no attempt to reform planning for new takeaways or provide business with limited time parking bay to allow them to remain in the community, which is a shame. Darren made an excellent point at the last committee meeting, jokingly saying what I've said for years about the limited parts of our HMO policy that remain unenforceable. An acceptance of Darren's statement, which I agree with, means the process is delegation is unauditable, which I know is something that Liberals like to make political points at. For this reason, all HMO must surely have to come to the planning committee, perhaps something for any other business.
Thank you. Thank you to Mr. Thorpe. You're not... Well, there you go. Mr. Hill.
Good afternoon. I'm going to speak quite quickly because there's a fair amount I want to get through. So firstly, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak, as you always do. Just to directly address some of the points in terms of this particular property. We have today received building control approval for the property. It's compliant with all your space standards, so every single bedroom is at least 10 square metres. I'd quickly like to apologise for the slight error made by our architects in terms of the annotation of the plans. I'm normally pretty good with that, so apologise about that. The communal area is fully compliant. Our business enjoys a very good reputation for completing very high quality HMOs which are super desirable for tenants, which is why we have 100% occupancy. We also have a waste carriers licence, so we're able to get rid of any rubbish. We have cleaners go into a property, into the communal areas every single week. We try and manage these as effectively as possible. I took a number of the points that were previously made by somebody with a deputation against HMOs and their concerns, and I've tried to implement them into our developments so that we are constantly improving them. A couple of points I quickly wanted to go through that are generic is, at the moment, actually I want to address the Trojan horse point first. So we keep being accused by putting these applications in of 6 bedrooms of doing a Trojan horse. The problem is, for us and for our investors that do these developments, by and large, a C4 application can be measured in the time it takes, in weeks, or worst case, months. But this committee's seen a number of applications for sui generis that have been decided in years, and most definitely in months. So the problem is, for the developer, do we put an application in as a C4 to get planning for 6 bedrooms and to enable us to occupy that property with 6 tenants initially, before we go for the much protracted process of getting sui generis, which could take months or years? And I appreciate that the planning officers do their best. This isn't a criticism of their policy, it's just a fact of life that that's the situation. Or, because we could get accused of trying to play the system, as Simon Turner said last time, do we put in an application for 7 straight away? The issue is, it ultimately ends up costing our tenants of not, or potential tenants of not having somewhere to live for months and in some cases years, and it significantly deters our investors from developing great, good quality HMOs in this city that are compliant with your space standards. So, unfortunately, because of the lay of the land, we have very little choice but to go from a business perspective, C4 applications first before we go for sui generis. That isn't to say that there is any veiled, anything underhand going on. We're ultimately being fully compliant with the planning system, but trying to get housing as quickly as possible within the confines of the current system. So, just in terms of HMOs in general, at the moment what we're seeing, and I can only speak from our experiences, interest rates have risen significantly. A very high proportion of buy-to-let investors are exiting the market. They are selling up. Significantly higher than ever before. Not only are some selling up, but there are significantly fewer people buying properties for buy-to-let. Why is that important? Because Portsmouth has one of the highest levels in the country of rental tenants. So we are more affected by that than any other city, than most other cities in this country. We also have exceptionally high levels of working age population of young people that it affects. It's the future of this city. So by providing HMOs, which are typically long-term investments, particularly when we've gone to the trouble of putting en suites in and we've done 6 and 7 bedrooms, we are purpose converting these properties to fill that void of the properties that are being sold by other buy-to-let investors. A lot of those buy-to-lets that are being sold are the smaller properties, 1 and 2 beds. And typically our tenants come from 3 places. We say they come up to us from a lower standard of HMO because we've got a high standard. They come into us because they come into the city for employment, because our city enjoys a very good reputation for employment and as a great place to live. And they also come down to us typically from larger properties, i.e. 1 beds. One of the criticisms we see of HMOs regularly is that they're taking away family homes. I would argue that it's exactly the opposite of that, because for every HMO that we do, which is a 7-bed or a 6-bed, we are limiting the number of 1-bed properties which are occupied by the people that occupy our properties. That therefore means that those properties are available for couples, for example, and that further trickles down the line to mean that there is actually more family housing as a direct result of us doing HMOs than there is a limitation of it. Similarly, you'll see that HMOs are significantly more convenient for an awful lot of our tenants. It gives them one bill, it gives them a lot of longevity of tenancy. I know I've got properties that I own that are standard buy-to-lets, where the tenants are constantly asking me whether we're going to sell up or whatever it is, because the environment is becoming more difficult for buy-to-let landlords. Actually, when you're purpose converting one of these properties, typically our investors do this for like a 10 to 15 year period, so that gives the tenants security of tenure for a longer period of time. You'll also see Portsmouth being the most densely populated city in the country. It's more important than anywhere else that we have really good quality HMOs. This city has 4,367 HMOs right now. I would argue that a lot of them are low standard, but they're not the type of properties like this that can accommodate en-suite bedrooms. They're typically flat-fronted, not bay and fork, or just flat-fronted properties near the university that have been converted really poorly with communal bathrooms. Ultimately, people vote with their feet, and in terms of HMOs, because we enjoy such a high level of occupancy, that shows me that our properties are those that people want to live in. So thank you very much. Last couple of points I'd make is we insulate every single property as much as possible to lower the noise. We also provide brand new plumbing and waste for the property to make sure that anything that's excreted within the property is removed effectively, and we comply with all building regs. We've actually we never had any issues whatsoever with either enforcement notices or building regs. We've always ended up with good quality compliant properties. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Hill, you'll be interested to know that we're the second most densely populated city outside London after Luton. Yeah. Councillor Peter Harris.
Just stole my thunder, Chair. I was just about to say that from the new census data.
I'm heartbroken.
I know. You always break my heart, Chair. Anyway, on to Shadwell Road. We will move on. Shadwell Road used to be quite a long, quiet road, which had a strong community of like-minded families. I mean, this has changed drastically in the last few years with the influx of the flat conversions and more recently these large-scale HMOs. I mean, officially there are 4 HMOs in the road. I actually suspect there's a lot more that we don't know about, but the 4 I sent this morning, I was quite quickly told that they weren't HMOs, so I was clearly wrong on that one. But there are more in there. There's definitely a lot more than the 4 that is stated. Several residents have written to me and they've expressed their concern and anger about these developments, which they feel are being signed off without second thought to those who live near them, which is obviously why I'm here again before you for this item. Even within well-managed HMOs, there are negative consequences attached, and there's also a negative perception about regarding the removal of good family housing stock. Also an increase in the population and already a high population density in the area, and obviously a lack of parking provision, an increase in nitrates due to population density, and more relevant to the given the current climate, the lineage of sewage and drainage systems. However, I mean, as we said, when a HMO is not well managed, which is sadly true of many, and I know Mr Hill's made reference to that already today, the negative consequences are endless, as you all know. I mean, Shadwell does have issues with regards to some of their HMOs. Neighbours of these developments have told me, and they've already witnessed large-scale police incidents linked to one property, loud fights by occupants of neighbouring properties, visits by emergency services, waste piled high in front of gardens, untended gardens, continuous drug use, with residents' gardens filled with the smell of cannabis throughout the whole of the last summer. So, I mean, I think we need to understand why residents are upset about these developments, and I'll just give you a list of those there. And furthermore, I do note that, I mean, I know parking is very difficult to sustain, but parking is a huge problem on this road. It really is, and within this area. And 6.6 of your report does admit that there will be additional demand created. You know, no parking survey information has been submitted to demonstrate on-street capacity. If additional demand resulting from the development can be accommodated within a 200 walk-mile distance to the application site. And it says, therefore, there is potential for increased incidence of residents driving around. There's not potential for it. It's happening now. Residents are continually driving around and round already to park their car, and they're parking not one street away, not 2 streets away. They're parking in neighbouring Copler. You know, they're parking along Northern Parade and literally walking home, which is not conducive to them. You know, so I think it's not good for our. We talk about our greening and our climate strategy, where I don't think a car driving around 6 times in different places, taking 20 minutes to get home, is really compliant with that at all, to be honest. You could justify that as a reason of refusal. I don't think you guys will. I think you'll be told that that's not a significant reason. But I do wish you would give it due weight in this determination of this matter. I mean, I just personally think the road's over capacity as it is due to the current layout, and I don't think there's been a significant look into this area for a long time. But I just want to say thank you for your consideration today. Otherwise, I'll keep going on, and it really angers me. I don't think you want to hear me anymore.
Thank you, Councillor Peter-Harris. Okay, members, questions on this application? Any questions? No questions? Should we go straight to comments?
I do actually feel like a broken record when it comes to this. I actually want to just correct Scott, just that their flat's actually been there a very long time. It's not as recent as you think. They've been there quite a long time, but I think the issue really comes down to the fact that they never get included within that 50 metres, and I know it's been mentioned many times, but I kind of feel that it should be included. I remember there was that previous application. It wasn't Hillsey, but we got flats on the corner, and essentially that's not included either. And you know, I've mentioned Shadwell Road before. I've mentioned about the census, about how many HMOs do we actually have down this road. I know you can only judge it by the data, but my concern is that there are other HMOs down there, even if they're illegal, including the flats and the parking. You know, it's not a. Everywhere has problems with parking, that's what we always say in Portsmouth, but this road, I can tell you right now, 30 years, I went there 30 years ago and it was bad then. So, we shouldn't be encouraging more roads, we should be looking at better infrastructure for transportation, because it's a shame really, actually, one of the conditions of HMO is that you can't just say to your, the tenants that they can't have a car. I mean, I know that's completely unreasonable, but it does get to that point where, if you are offering good, accommodation, I know you offer bike racks, but I doubt they're used very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Russell.
Chair, if I may, just on something that Councillor Simpson, just a matter of interpretation. I'm sorry, Councillor Simpson, I didn't mean to say unofficial flat conversions, but I'm sorry. No, I understand your point. Carry on.
Thank you, very kind of you. Any other comments from members before Councillor Sanders?
I'm not going to get into the Hillsey knife fight, if I may. but it does raise. But I would just wanted to thank Scott, Russell and Simon, actually, for raising many of the issues. I mean, we have gone way, way beyond this application, frankly, but that's a good thing, because actually some of these issues do need to be teased out as we look through the local plan, as we bring in extra licensing, because the housing market in the city is market failure. Simple. Many people feel trapped. Private rents are rising massively. And also local communities feel frustrated because the sort of thing Simon said about, well, I've got to do one and then I'll do another, makes people think that developers aren't real and developers are cheating people. And when you're automatically suspicious, which is what Scott and Russell and me earlier on were raising for our local people, I've got conservatories that are now HMOs. So I have local residents in my ward going, well, should you oppose every conservatory in the city? Which would be quite nice. So I think there are real issues that will be teased out through the local planning process. And I want to thank Simon, Scott and Russell for raising those. As far as I can see, there is a case for refusing this on the grounds of highways. I'm not totally sure it'll be a sustainable appeal, but I could see a reason for it from this one. But the rider issues, I think, are long overdue and need to be raised more widely as we inch towards a solution.
Yes, indeed. Was that a proposal, or was it short of a proposal?
I'm not sure it'll survive. I'm not sure it will survive, frankly.
Okay.
But the highways thing is real, and it's not the first one.
Okay. Russell?
Just to add again, that also another thing I'm always hearing is the value of properties, the decreasing of their property because of the rise of HMOs, and to say the fact that it already has so many flats as it is converted, it just makes it very undesirable for new families. So essentially, you just might as well just knock it all down and build flats.
Okay. All right. And it is useful we spend some time talking about some of the wider issues, I think. Okay. Well, I shall move the officer's recommendation. Is there a seconder for that? I think Councillor Smythe just got in there. Any other thoughts and ideas before we move to a vote? No. So those in favour of the proposal? And those against? And I don't think there are any abstentions.
Planning permission's granted.
Thank you very much. I'm mindful Councillor Mason has to go and put another hat on. Not another hat, another chain on, I suspect. We will move on to Porchester Road. Yes, we're swapping the last two around. So Porchester Road, Ian?
Thank you. 107 Porchester Road. This is a single-storey rear and side, sort of the rear extension. Members will have seen many similar extensions, I'm sure, in the past. It's fairly standard Portsmouth property, and a wraparound extension you can see here going down the side gunnel, that light well at single storey, and then coming back round on the rear of the property, squaring off the small kitchen space to be a larger kitchen family room space. There are no objections to this, nor indeed any concerns from planning officers or other professionals. It's here because the applicant is a member of staff.
Thank you. Any questions? Any comments? Councillor Sanders.
I wish to move the officer recommendations.
Seconded. Councillor Symes, thank you. Okay, we shall move to the vote. I don't see anybody else indicating. Those in favour of the motion? Against? That's it, I think.
That's unanimous. Planning permission is granted.
Thank you, Juliet. Charles, we need to ask you to remove yourself. Thank you very much for your attendance. Oh, you're going to keep your stuff, okay. For the last item, Highbury Way. Okay, Ian, over to you.
Thank you. 8 Highbury Way. This is described as a retrospective application for the construction of 2 rear outbuildings. That's what has been made. In truth, they only need permission for one of them. They have planning permission for the other. The garage has been converted into a playroom, into a habitable room, and a side store building has been constructed. That garage conversion, say, already has planning permission under a 2020 planning application, but the side store room, which does need planning permission, does not. That's therefore the retrospective element to it, but I think obviously for tidiness sake, the applicant has chosen to put both of them into the application and its description. They are fairly straightforward buildings, brick built. That image probably gives you the best illustration, photograph from the highway there of those buildings. And as you can see, the overall construction therefore ends up with a small internal courtyard. So both buildings, while physically attached to each other just about, are accessible through the rear of number 8, the property, and into the appropriate doors. This is retrospective. That's perfectly lawful, of course, and therefore members need to make a determination. In this case, it is here, as you've probably worked out, because the applicant is a member of the council.
Thank you. Members, any questions? Councillor Sanders.
Paragraph 2.4. I'm sorry, I couldn't understand paragraph 2.4. And what I thought it was scared me a little witless. Because particularly the sentence which says, the recent store, quotation marks, extension, does not comply with the requirements of Part 1 Class A of the General Permitted Development Order, notably being closer to the highway than the original dwelling. It should be noted that while due to its disconjoined construction, the development is technically considered an extension to the original dwelling house. Both of the buildings require the user to exit the house into a rear yard and enter either building independently. I'm not quite clear what that actually means and whether that affects our decision today. Ian, does it?
Apologies, I'm not quite clear what you're unclear on, so it's very unhelpful.
Is the general permit? I've never seen a general permitted development order. That's my weakness and my fault. So does that mean that the applicant here has done anything wrong?
Absolutely, they've undertaken development without plan permission, the most heinous of all offences to humanity.
Aside from that minor detail, Ian, which anyone else can do.
Say the undertaking of development without plan permission is not a criminal offence. It is a breach of planning control. Consequently, one way to resolve it is through regularisation applications, i.e. a retrospective application. While there is built into our guidance a suggestion that deliberate breach of planning control is something that you should give material consideration to, a rather odd element of material consideration, but nevertheless part of guidance. There's nothing here I would suggest, though I cannot know, because I cannot speak for what is in someone's mind, that this was a deliberate breach of planning control, as this paragraph alludes to the General Permitted Development Order, that order that allows all 157, in fact, different things one can do with your land without having to ask my permission, is a confusing document, 271 pages of fascinating read if you do wish to get stuck into it. So it's not uncommon for householders in particular to make small errors of judgment and undertake development that they perhaps thought didn't need express permission from the council, and then discover later on that in fact it did, and they are therefore invited to make retrospective applications such as this to come back. So did they do something wrong? Yes, they did development without plan permission. Is it acceptable or not? That's the judgment you're being asked to make.
Okay, thank you, Ian. I'm not going to read all 271 pages, but thank you very much.
Maybe best described as 15 love, Mr. Maguire. I think. Well done. Okay. Any other questions? We're being asked to regularise the work. Okay. Comments? Russell?
I'm just curious, I mean, what's normally the procedure when someone does this anyway? Irrelevant of it being a councillor or not?
Exactly this, except we have delegated authority to determine householder applications with no objections.
Okay. Let's make some progress. I'm going to move the officer's recommendation. Councillor Symes has seconded. Unless there's any other views, those in favour? I think that's it. Thank you very much. That concludes today's business. Thank you all. I shall close the meeting at 13:39. Thank you.